Hello, and welcome to the Chronic Pain Experience podcast. I am your host and chronic pain recovery coach, Dina Chopolis. If you're listening to this, chances are you've been grappling with pain for some time now, and you're searching for answers, solutions, anything that might offer relief. Well, you're in the right place. Living with chronic pain can often feel like navigating a maze with no end in sight. As a chronic pain coach, I'm dedicated to bridging the gap between you and your physician with groundbreaking, evidence-based, transformative approaches. Together, we'll explore strategies, insights, and stories that empower you to reclaim control over your life and rewrite the narrative of pain. So if you're ready to shift from merely surviving to thriving, join me on this journey. Together, we'll uncover the keys to unlocking a life beyond pain. Research tells us that connection, touch, and intimacy are not luxuries, they're biological needs. They're very much a part of who we are as a species. They're part of how we regulate our nervous system, how we feel safe, how we experience life and being a human being. And yet, for so many people living with chronic pain, this is the very part of life that starts to quietly disappear. Not because they don't want to, not because they don't care, but because their body has learned to protect. Protect from pain, protect from flare-ups, protect from uncertainty. And over time, that protection can start to look like distance, avoidance, disconnection from others, and even from themselves. And here's the part we don't talk enough about. What happens to intimacy when your body doesn't feel safe? What happens to desire when your nervous system is in protection mode? And what happens to relationships when pain becomes the third person in the room? If you've ever felt like this part of your life has changed or even slipped away, you are not alone. And more importantly, there is nothing wrong with you. Today, we're opening up a conversation that is long overdue. We're talking about intimacy, sexual health, and chronic pain. Not just what's hard, but what's possible. Because even in a body that feels protective, connection can be relearned, safety can be rebuilt, and intimacy can take on a whole new meaning. Today, I would love to introduce to you Dr. Diane Mueller to the show. Diane, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Diane, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to tell people how much I get from a personal level the chronic pain journey.
Mhm,
I am a Lyme and mold illness survivor. And at one point, I had pain so bad that the way I would describe it, it was like my leg was being sawed off.
mhm.
And doctor after doctor after doctor, and no relief. And that was all actually starting when I was in holistic medical school. I'm a naturopathic doctor.
Oh,
And when I was in school, it was just crazy, right? Going to so many doctors, nobody had any idea what was going on. And around the time of graduation, discovered that I had Lyme and mold
mhm,
illness and half a dozen to a dozen other types of situations and infections.
mhm,
So that actually began my first business, which I still have up and going, which is my Lyme dog. I've been a Lyme literate doctor for 15 years now and do treat so much of that still.
mhm,
And several years back, I decided that there was another way I wanted to contribute to the world beyond just Lyme. And I had been studying sexuality from my early 20s. And that actually interesting started because even before all the Lyme symptoms, I was doing well, mostly well health wise. I had some gut issues, but nothing like the pain scenario. But one of the things that happened when I was in my late teens, early 20s was I had this vulvar pain. And the vulvar pain was really interesting. It was another story of like, went to doctors. This was before I
mhm.
was in medicine, went to doctors. Everybody's like, well, we ran all the tests, we did all the pap smears, we looked for all the diseases, you're good.
Yeah,
But pain was keeping me up.
but you're
It was
not
like,
good.
but I'm
Yeah.
not good, right? Like so many people I know are listening around, like, well, something is clearly going on. So
Mm,
it's keeping me up at night. And a friend of mine at the time, a roommate of mine, I was telling her about this. She's like, you got to read this book. And this book was so risque for me at the time. It was called Sex for One by Betty Dodson. And so it's all about self pleasure. And that was like, I had a very, very, very Christian Catholic upbringing. So the idea of this was like, oh my goodness, this was like, who is this woman talking about this stuff, you know? But once I started reading it, and I started reading it kind of out of desperation one night, and I was like, well, I just need answers. So I started reading the book, and in the book, it was talking about how Betty, like through some of her studies, was finding that one of the symptoms that was going away for people was pain. So I was like,
Mm.
oh, this is interesting. And so
Mhm.
after a few days of reading this and kind of convincing myself I wasn't going to burn in the fiery gates of hell,
Mhm.
I decided to try my own self pleasure practice. And so I did, and the pain went away.
Aha.
I was like, wow, this is interesting.
So
So,
interesting. Yeah.
right. So that actually began my curiosity around human sexuality.
Mm.
And really led me to believe what I now believe and talk about in my best-selling book, which is pleasure is not just about desire, but something we require. And I can back that up, not with my own personal experience,
Mhm.
but with science and data of what I mean there.
Yeah.
But, largely to answer your question long-winded about my story around like what happened after that was just like mostly just curiosity around sex and relationships and relationship styles and attachment theory. And
Yeah.
a lot of that I was just doing in my own world, casually on a Sunday, reading, taking courses,
Yeah.
these sorts of things. And then in my line practice, like your intro to the show is just exemplifies exactly what I've seen in my own line practice, which is
Mhm.
when we have these chronic conditions, in
Mhm.
many ways, they don't happen to just the individual. They happen to the couple, they happen to the
Yes.
family,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because the number of times I would see people and their relationship would just like go downhill, combine that with the number of like just divorce we have
Mhm.
around intimacy being one of the top 5 reasons people get divorced. So a few years back, that's when I decided to open up this second brand, my libido doc, and really just kind of focus as kind of at this point just like a side project really beyond my line project to say, hey, how can we help couples that are in things like chronic pain or chronic
Mhm.
disease get connected,
Mhm.
as well as how can we help people once once they're well also be get to a point where they're prioritizing their partner again, passion, and they're
Yeah.
staying married. And so
Yeah.
now I run what I call the Hot Monogamy Society, which is really about teaching couples how to look at like the root causes of low desire, how to
Yeah.
work desire mismatch, how to bring novelty back in, and really how to keep their marriage or their long-term relationship happy and healthy.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably spend about 3 hours talking about this because it is really important, but it's also not talked about nearly enough. And I'm wondering, in your humble opinion, why is it we don't talk about this enough?
I can tell you it's amazing to me the level of taboo that
Mm,
we
true.
still have around sex. And,
Mhm.
it's like, I think there's a level where it's like a lot of people don't feel comfortable. Like some surveys have shown that that people want to talk to their doctor about it, but then they are worried about making their doctor uncomfortable. And doctors really typically aren't even trained,
Right.
counselors aren't even really trained. If we look even at like simple things, like I have my picture of the clitoris here, like most of us think of the clitoris as just like a nub, right? But like the clitoris is like this whole like wishbone.
Uh,
Like, so those of you that are listening, I'm holding up a diagram that almost looks like a wishbone. And so like
yeah,
that nub that we see of the clitoris, that's only one tiny part of it.
right.
And I give this as an example because in school, I have 2 doctorate degrees. I have 2 clinical doctorate degrees. I didn't learn this in school.
No.
I took a year of cadaver lab.
Hmm.
I dissected the body, the brain, inside and out for an entire year.
Yeah.
We didn't learn this. I know anatomy
Mm.
really well. So
Yes.
to me, that just shows like a level of like, wow, if I can have this level of education around the body, and we're not even taught this, and we're
Yeah.
not taught in school about the difference between the female arousal cycle and the male arousal cycle. I think it's taboo, but I think to answer your question, I think another problem we have is people just don't know what they don't know,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's so easy to just be like, well, this is just normal and this is just what it is
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
nobody knows any different.
Yeah, and I think that's very much what we experience with chronic pain and chronic illness is there's just a whole bunch of unknowns. So we talked a little bit about, or at least you mentioned in your introduction, this, it's almost like a paradox. Intimacy or sex can be really uncomfortable for those who live with pain or chronic illness, but there are times when intimacy can really help mitigate that pain. And so I know there's a lot of fear that's built up around intimacy because of the pain it might cause. So let's unpack this a little bit and just talk a little bit about it. What are some of the challenges or the common challenges that you experience in your practice for those who live with pain or chronic illness?
Yeah, it's a great question. And your intro to the question really brings up the idea of vicious cycle. In
Mm,
medicine, I feel like there's these like vicious cycles, right?
right.
Where it's like, okay, so somebody has pain, and that pain is raising cortisol.
Mhm.
And that cortisol typically, yeah, it's our stress hormone, right? And that typically for most people is a brake. It puts the brakes on
Right.
their libido, their desire. And there's a few exceptions. Some people stress can be an accelerator.
Yeah.
But so it's like we have pain, we have cortisol. Most commonly, that's the brakes on the accelerator. Well, what's interesting then is our sex hormone oxytocin.
Mm,
That's where we can actually start to reduce cortisol. We can start to reduce pain. We can start to do all these things, but we can't get there because of all these problems. The other
mm,
thing that's really interesting is when we talk about vulvar pain, right, or pelvic pain,
mhm.
right? That pain could be in your sexual organs, but a lot of people have like chronic low back pain, chronic
Right.
hip pain, right? All that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we have 14 muscles that make up the pelvic floor. They kind of sit like a hammock in our lower abdomen. And so they
Mhm.
hold up all our abdominal organs, but they also make our back strong. If they're working correctly, they lead to like that whole middle section feeling good,
Yeah.
but that of course can radiate below and above.
Yeah.
And these muscles also go into the pelvic floor. So sometimes we can have scenarios where, oh, the muscles inside
Hmm.
are actually the ones that are like the fascia is really tight,
Mm,
muscles aren't stretching and relaxing like appropriately, so the contracting and relaxing
yeah.
function of the muscles aren't working. That's called elasticity. That's causing problems. And when it's like we're back to the vicious cycle, because like for women, one of the best ways, and this has been researched, that 3 times a week use of vibrators,
Mm,
12 weeks has shown to have a 5 times reduction in pelvic pain.
really?
So yeah, so some, and this is why some vibrators are even FDA approved, or you can use like HSA and FSA accounts for
Hmm.
them. Not all
Hmm.
the ones that are doing these studies you can, and it's because of the fact that wow, this pain is actually being reduced. But of course, then we get into a little bit of the vicious cycle, right? Well, it's like okay, for a lot of people, I say this, and it can be very scary to even think about using this because the
Yeah.
idea, if
Yeah.
you have pain,
Yeah.
sometimes applying something like a vibrator or
Yeah.
abusing, it's like sometimes you don't even have the elasticity to use it.
Right. Good point.
So
Just to interject there, I think one thing that's just to add a dose of hope, and I know you would share the same message, is that even with something as powerful as self-pleasure is we can find ways to for exposure therapy, right? To really return someone to that if they want to. So there are things we can do as providers and you as chronic pain warriors is to help if that's something you're really interested in doing but are scared of doing that or don't know much about it. There's ways that we could through exposure therapy create scenarios of safety around the use of a vibrator, for example.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And I want everybody like listening too. It's like what I've seen in my 15 years of practice at my Lyme doc is anytime we're talking about something chronic like this,
Yeah.
there are a multitude of root causes.
Yeah.
So in 15 years, I've never seen one patient with a chronic condition where it's like, oh, there's only one reason for it.
Right. Right.
Right? So it's usually a combination of like, well, it could be structural, it could be
Hmm.
stress, it could
Yeah.
be inflammatory from the gut, it could be
Yeah.
nervous system, could be chronic infections, toxins, on and on and on and on, right?
Yeah. That's right.
I could list probably 20 more off the top of my head, but
Yep.
just keep going here. So when we're talking about this as a tool,
Hmm.
using intimacy as a tool, using this is looking at, okay, well, if we have 12 different root causes,
Yeah.
where in order for people to tend to get out of it, what happens for a lot of people is they only address one. And then,
Right.
well, if they have 10
Right.
or 12 root causes, and it's like, well, this one isn't working,
Yeah.
then they think like, well, it's not that, and they put it away and they're like, this doesn't work, versus like realizing like, oh, well, you might not notice it if that's only 7 to 10% of it. But if you have like 10,
Yeah.
12 different things and they all make up, 7, 10, 8, 9, 10,
Yep.
11% of the puzzle, you get enough of them stacking. And that's when you start to get the change.
Right.
So what I've also seen from a hope perspective is that when people are really find all the root causes, the
Hmm.
number of times I've seen people where it's like, wow, like Western conventional medicine has said, you have to live with this. Here's your
Hmm.
strategy,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And given Lyrica, given opioids, whatever it is, and they're just like told to deal with it,
Right.
right? It's there's always a reason. So that's like the hope is like if you keep looking for answers holistically to look at all the root causes, I really see people getting out of this.
Yes.
So I can say that, like I said, I just seen it so many times in my practice. So
Yep.
from the intimacy side of things, I mean, I would always approach anything with that level of tenderness and gentleness.
Right.
And remember, there's like lots of ways we can actually experience intimacy and get these chemicals going. So
Right.
it's like, okay, well, if we have something going on in our pelvic region, it's like, let's say there is low back pain, let's say there is hip pain, vulvar pain.
Hmm.
If a man's listening, obviously not the vulvar pain, but you can have scrotal pain and all these other areas that have problems.
Hmm.
You do want to eventually probably address those areas, but oftentimes starting there, and it might not be the thing to do. So, like intimately wise, like the number of receptors we have for pleasure, like in the breasts, for example.
Hmm.
And this is going to sound crazy, but there's people that have figured out how to have things like elbow orgasms, which just is like
Ah,
insane, right? To
yeah.
think like, wow, we can have orgasms, but like the point is like the body is equipped with so many pleasure receptors.
Mm.
So a lot of intimacy initially, if there's pain, it doesn't have to be penetrative sex, right? It doesn't have to
Right.
be that. It can be how can we actually open up your body to experience pleasure?
Yes.
And a lot of that also is related to the capacity of being present.
Yes.
Something I talk a lot about. It is impossible to experience pleasure if we are not present. It's like nobody has ever had an orgasm, I'm pretty sure, while they are simultaneously doing the to-do list in their head.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Oh, I love that you brought that up because it just pulls together nicely the whole biological side and the psychological side, which intimacy very much is. And then the part I worry too about is that those who have lived with chronic illness or pain for some time are often the ones that are going to be a little harder on themselves, not feeling as attractive as they once did or as desirable. And so, how do we help people who are really feeling that way?
It's so interesting because this is another vicious cycle. Like the
Hmm.
what we see is that sex and intimacy actually raises body confidence. So
Mm.
here's the cycle we get in, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, we're not feeling comfortable in our body. It's like maybe we're in pain, we don't move as well, maybe we put on some weight, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then like for most people, like at one point in my life, I was 50 pounds heavier. I've been all sorts of weights in my life. And like I saw it too when I was that weight around like, wow, my libido, like I just didn't want people to see me naked. And so it's very common that when we become less confident in our body, then we are like actually drawn to intimacy less.
Yes.
But I think some of it probably comes psychologically for like being held and being touched and being cherished, whatever our body looks like.
Mm.
And it actually can improve that psychological self-esteem.
Right.
So there is a level of, okay, like what helps to get back in your body? Sometimes simple things like having intimate moments with the lights out. And I definitely encourage self-touch first around like, just laying on your back and just letting your hands rub over your belly, your curves, your fat rolls, whatever they are,
Mm-hmm.
and just literally breathing into them and just telling yourself that they're beautiful. I
Mm-hmm.
listened to a talk from, I think this was Donna Eden, if I remember, the energy worker that was this talk. It was so long ago. I'm pretty sure that's who it was, but she was talking about, because it's like somebody that can actually visualize energy, and she was talking about like what the energy of fat looks like, and she's somebody that can see auras and that sort of thing, and she was describing the energy of fat, like the auric field of fat, as just like the most beautiful thing that you could ever encounter. So I'm honestly not a believer from a health perspective of like every single body at any size is healthy. Like, I really think there's a lot of data that shows that by keeping a lean body, it really improves things like cardiovascular function and blood sugar and all these. But that being said, we still have the capacity to show love and kindness, and there's still beauty at
Yes.
every
Yes.
time, right? And I think that's what a lot of this is realizing, okay, there's still a lot of beauty at whatever way your body is moving. And some of that does come from a level of, okay, I'm going to first be comfortable with myself.
Right.
And then, and maybe it starts then as like, okay, well, if you haven't been intimate in a while, like, again, we don't have to jump to anything. It doesn't have to be jumping to like, okay, well, let me just be fully naked with my partner if that's
Right.
never happened,
Yeah.
right? Maybe we find some beautiful lingerie. Maybe it's just a beautiful slip dress that we
Hmm.
feel pretty. And maybe we let them rub their hands over our body while we're wearing that. Maybe we only show the upper part of our body. Maybe we wear a short skirt, whatever it is,
Hmm.
and just allowing yourself to be cherished in these ways first that feel the most safe and comfortable. So
Yes.
that can be a way to approach it too. Is like, okay, what part of my body do I feel the safest and what part of my body do I feel the most comfortable about? And if it doesn't feel like any part of your body you feel 100% awesome about, that's fine. What do you feel the most awesome about?
Hmm.
Right? That's the question. And then start there and allow yourself to just receive love in that way.
Mm. Oh, and it just creates such a beautiful sense of safety for your brain if you can allow that to happen, right? To just be a little kinder, gentler.
Safety is so important.
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
I'm sometimes asked like what I think is like from an intimacy standpoint, the core
Mhm.
most important thing in order to be intimate. And I think about this question often and I waver back and forth, but that I always tend to come back to the same answer, which is safety.
Yes.
And I say that not because we can't be intimate without it, but because we can't be deeply intimate, I believe, without it. Like we can still
Love it.
have, people have one night stands, like we can still
Yeah.
of course
Right. Yeah.
moments, right?
Yeah.
So there is an element of that. But if we are actually opening up to ourselves to like the core of who we are. And some people can have great safety, generate that in very short times with people, right?
Hmm.
But that be able to say, oh, I can be vulnerable, I can be penetrated, I can be touched in all these ways, I can
Hmm.
let somebody see me in all these ways, I can let somebody feel me in all these ways, I can let somebody have these intimate whispers of things back and
Right.
forth. Like all of that is safety.
Yeah.
And so, to your point, to begin to allow your body to receive touch in a way where it's like, oh, this feels safe. And
Right.
I use this is where it comes back to presence too,
Yeah.
because I would tell people to use presence as
Yeah.
kind of their marker around like their body's safety. So
Hmm.
it's very, very normal, especially for women, to have moments during intimacy where it's like, whoa, why am I thinking about doing dishes right now?
Yeah.
That's normal. What is a problematic, what is a cue for you if you notice that and it's like it's hard for you to get back and feel the sensation. So, in intimacy, like, oh, the brain wanders for a second. Wow, why was I thinking about that? Boom, right
Yeah.
back body, my partner, myself.
Yeah.
And so if you're finding that like with touch, where it's like, okay, I'm trying to create safety and like my hands on my body here, my partner's hands on my body there. And all of a sudden your brain just like way checks out
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like uncomfortable to be back in your body.
Yeah.
That's a big sign that you've kind of pushed past your safety zone. And then
Right.
you can say, okay, well, how can we move the hand a little bit like lower, higher to the left or to right, what it is,
Yeah.
whatever it is, in order to say, oh, okay, here
Yes.
I can be in my safety zone. And
Right.
in that way, we can then do deep breathing, look in each other's eyes. We can
Yeah.
even tell our partner as we're exploring touch this way, like what we
Yeah.
need to hear,
Right. Oh, yes.
right?
Yeah. The
So it's like,
communication part. Oh,
it is. It is.
yeah.
And you say like, oh yeah, like, okay, like I need to hear when I'm in this moment, it's almost like meditation. It's like it's
Hmm.
neural retraining. And so we can
Hmm.
say, hey, I need to hear when I'm in this moment.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to hear I'm beautiful. Maybe I need to hear you love my curves. Maybe I need to hear
Right.
I'm the apple of your eye or whatever
Yeah.
your language, your love language is there.
Hmm.
But that can really help to then create that level of safety at that level. It's
Right.
okay, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe.
Yeah.
Then usually we can say, okay, well, maybe next week we can explore like moving the hand a little this way. Can I still touch
Exactly.
my body?
Yeah, coming at it from an exploratory, curiosity, kindness type of safe adventure. And the more we do this, the easier it will become. And I think that's an important part for people to remember is that it takes practice.
I mean, like anything, right? It's
Yeah.
like, it's so, and this is where I think there's so much misunderstanding about what sex should be. And I say
Right.
that for audio listeners and air quotes here, because
Yeah.
when we think about starting a new gym
Mhm.
routine, keeping up with a gym routine, anybody that goes to the gym and probably finds three exercises that they do. Let's say I'm going to only do bicep curls, squats, and one version of sit-ups. Okay, well, you might get like some level of minor changes
Yeah.
there, but when like the people that wind up doing really well, they have this whole process and they have a program and they know what to do and they know how
Mm,
to push it and they know what to eat, and maybe they're mixing it up sometimes and they're bringing their cross training, they're doing a little cardio here, they're changing their cardio, they're doing things to continue to challenge their body in different ways so it doesn't just adapt
yeah.
and loses, or it doesn't lose the ability to be challenged and to break down and
Right.
rebuild stronger, which is
Yeah.
what we're doing with exercise.
Yeah.
And sexual exploration is really so analogous to that, but we're just not taught that. And so
Mm.
we think that it's always supposed to be like this one way and this like
Right.
scene from the movies where it's like, oh, like
Yes.
lovers kiss for like passionately for 1 minute and all of a sudden
Yeah.
they're penetrating and they're having both having the best orgasm of their life. Like,
Right.
it's not that that can't happen, but that's not the way that it commonly looks.
Right. It shouldn't be the expectation either.
It
So,
shouldn't be the expectation, right?
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Too much pressure.
that's right. It's still a lot of pressure. And so
Yeah.
when we can take that out and we can just say, hey,
Mm.
this is about an example of the pain. It's like, okay, it's about healing our body, which I
Mhm.
really believe sex can do because of all the studies. There's
Right.
studies on improving sleep, there's studies on building bone with sex, there's studies
Right.
on anxiety and depression, the
Yeah.
support of the relationship.
Hmm.
So when we're looking at this, I really tell people take the idea of this is what's it's supposed to be out.
Yeah.
Like that is
Yes. Yeah.
sex.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. And come at this from how can we explore each other's bodies? How can we grow closer? How can we lessen pain?
Yeah.
How can we have less anxiety? How can we just explore this gift of pleasure
Mhm.
that we were given? And I really believe we were given this as one of many tools, certainly not in isolation, but as one of many tools that we have in our tool bag as humans to connection and heal.
Absolutely. And I think my favorite message of all of this is that just like any married couple is going to start off with sex one way, the movie sex, and then eventually after time it gravitates to something completely different. It's the same with chronic illness and chronic pain. If we can just, try to change up the narrative, perhaps the expectations, and explore, be curious. It's okay for things to change, to think about sex differently.
Yeah, it's okay for things to change, and it's also okay for things to be awkward. It's okay to try.
Mm.
It's like I think that's another thing. It's like, well, so many times if like it like doesn't go well or it's awkward or like, oh, we have to stop because that hurt or whatever. It's so easy for people to get hurt by that and be like,
Mm.
oh, wow, like, okay, I didn't please them. And like, as humans, as partners, there is a fundamental driver to
Right.
please each other and otherwise.
Yeah.
And so one of these things that I think can happen is like, oh, if we start to open up our intimate life to say, okay, we're gonna like explore this beyond our ABC sex, what can happen is it can all of a sudden, okay, well, maybe it doesn't go well one time. Maybe it's awkward. Maybe there's he or she don't have the pleasure that they want.
Hmm.
And it's so easy then to like form this belief around like, oh gosh, I'm a bad lover. I can't please my partner. And then people don't
Right.
go there again
Yeah.
because it's been so hurtful to both of them.
Yes.
So, and it's a really important reframe in how we talk about this. I didn't know this in medical, like I didn't learn this with a double doctorate degree on the human body.
Yeah.
How are people ever supposed to know? So it's like we
Right.
have to go into this with a huge curiosity, be like, okay, it might be awkward
Yeah.
sometimes. We might not get it right sometimes. And that literally means nothing about you. It means nothing about me.
Yeah.
It just means we are both brave enough that we care about ourselves and each other enough to explore this. And when we can
Hmm.
actually say, like, hey, this doesn't mean anything as
Hmm.
far as you or me, then we can come to the table afterwards and we can talk about, like, hey, this is so cool. How brave are we that we are trying this? And like,
Yeah.
it can really change the conversation instead of making it about anybody doing anything wrong. And instead making it about like this cool thing that puts you back on the same team to say, how can we grow closer? How can we explore our bodies? How can we use this for healing?
Hmm.
for intimacy without it meaning anything if it happens to go wrong one time,
Right.
other than like, oh, we went to the gym, we were a little tired, we didn't have a good
Yeah.
workout that day. It
Right.
means nothing. We were a little tired. Who cares? We'll go back to the gym tomorrow. Try again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also for our listeners who may not be in a couple, I think a lot of these principles apply for self-pleasure too, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there's so much we can do. And even for couples that are in relationships, I still encourage them to have a self pleasure practice.
Right.
So much benefit from that.
Yeah,
So, whether you're in a partnership or not, I think self pleasure is a huge part of it. And if you're listening, you're like, wow, I'm not in a partnership. One, there's a lot you can do still for pain and
yeah,
for still getting all of these juicy hormones going that can help heal.
for sure.
And secondly, it's a great time to learn more about your own body, because
Mhm.
another thing that I just think is we've got so wrong in intimacy is just assuming that we know each other's bodies, or assuming because we've had one or multiple partners before our present partner that we know what our current partner wants or needs. And
Right.
plus, an aging body, like with the point you bring up around like marriage, we see the same like around long term around like, oh,
Yeah.
if it's that beginning time is going to be different than like later on,
Yeah.
right? The same thing's true about our bodies. It's been shown, for example, that in many women the G spot can generate scar tissue around it. If you got scar
Mm.
tissue on your G spot, probably not going to have as much pleasure there. We see changes
Oh,
as we go through perimenopause and menopause around
yes.
how much blood flow goes there, right? I'm
Yeah.
45, I'm in it right now, real time.
Yep. Me too.
Uh, yeah, it's a fun journey. It really is.
Yeah.
It's challenging, but it also brings like so much opportunity for reconstructing what life is like at this stage. And men see
Mhm.
it too, right?
Mhm.
It's like it's very common that even in the 30s, there's enough of change in hormones for men for maybe the hard-ons, the erections don't last like quite as long, or they don't come quite as easy.
Mhm.
And so these changing bodies,
Yeah.
it's like one of the biggest things with any of this is to say, oh, we have to come to intimacy with not thinking that just because we knew a partner in a previous relationship, or just because we knew our current partner 5 years ago, 10
Yeah.
years ago, or even 1 year ago, and sometimes even like one day ago, that we know anything about like their body today. And
Hmm.
when we take all of this out around, oh, this doesn't mean anything that your body's responding different today. That just means like every day these bodies are like uniquely different.
Exactly.
It's just, I think that one of the biggest things too, I just want to impart on everybody is just think broader than what we're thinking around sexual intimacy, and just be curious and really work to
Right.
take the stigma out of, hey, it has to look this way. Otherwise, somebody's a bad lover or bad.
Right.
We got to get rid of that, because we can't ever grow with
Right.
that sort of mentality.
And you can see where that mentality really, really starts to break down a relationship when they're just being that hard on each other. So.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I should bring up as well, I know those many who have chronic illness or chronic pain have come from a past of trauma. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't at least bring this into the conversation. When it comes to intimacy and trauma, there may be those who need to seek help outside of ourselves. What can we bring to the table for those who might be experiencing or have experienced trauma in the past, whether it be sexual trauma or not? How do we help them?
I do want to name in this conversation, right, that there's, I think a lot of people know the idea of like big T trauma and little t trauma.
Right.
And so, we can have our big T traumas like sexual assaults or
Yeah.
other types of horrible things. And we can have our little t traumas, and little t traumas can be as simple as like, oh, some comment that a partner made in passing, maybe when they
Mhm.
were like giving oral sex, or, or just being
Right.
intimate.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't even mean anything, but you took it away where it's, oh gosh, like maybe there's some sort of level of story you're still holding around that's actually preventing you from being in your body in the moment. So and I want to say like I am a clinical doctor. I am not a therapist,
Right.
so
Same.
really can't
Mhm.
answer this from a therapy perspective.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is if you've worked with a therapist or done your work and you feel like, okay, like the real intensity of the
Yeah.
trauma is processed.
Hmm.
One of the things that I have seen that can be very, very helpful is back to this whole like presence practice that I was
Hmm.
talking about.
Hmm.
because it's back to safety in the nervous system. And no matter what is happening, whether it's trauma or just acute stress, if we're noticing that, hey, when we're touched in a certain way or we're touched in a certain place, we're checking out a lot,
Hmm.
that can be a very, very, very big sign of not feeling safe.
Right.
So I do think the utilization of your body being present is
Yep.
incredibly important.
Yep.
So you're like, oh, you try XYZ and you're like, wow, I'm checking out. Rather than doing something like feeling like, well, I got to do this, I got to push through this, yada,
Right.
yada,
Right.
backing up and saying, okay, well, what actually is my body, and listening, listening to your body, what
Yep.
actually in my body
Yep.
will allow me to participate in a way that allows me to be present. And depending upon the level of trauma and where you're at with your process and healing, this process I'm talking about might be best also guided by a sex therapist or a trauma therapist.
Hmm.
But that's my, kind of just big advice there is follow your body and use your body as the guide, because if you're present, that's
Yes.
a big sign that your body is feeling safe. If you can't get present, that's a big sign that your body is not feeling safe. And if you continue past that feeling of not safe, feeling safe,
Yeah.
that can then let your body and send a signal to your brain around like, oh, well, now I'm not even protecting myself, and it can
Mm.
really raise that fight or flight, that adrenaline type of chemical that we
Right.
want to get you out of in order to really experience pleasure.
Ah, amazing. I'm so glad you said that. Just like in any treatment protocol, when it comes to chronic pain, at least for the work that I do, we want to rule out the red flags first. And oftentimes it is going to see a therapist around trauma. And so yeah, I think once people get into that situation and they start to do that work, they realize how much of an impact it actually has. But that was a great follow-up comment too. So thank you so much. Before we let you go, and I don't really want to end this conversation because it is so important, but is there anything you want our listeners to know before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I mean, definitely if you want help with any of this, I would definitely recommend go check out my book,
Hmm.
How to Want It. This is a first one of a two-part series. The second one is coming out June of 26, so very, very shortly here. And then I also have my Hot Monogamy Society, which is really, it's done very professionally, very classy, just like this interview. And it's through a professional, classy way, also allowing couples to come in anonymously, so protect your privacy, all of that. Really teaching you how to have these conversations. Like, we're expanding on a lot of what we're talking about today, how to bring more novelty and passion back, how to try new things, how to talk about them, how to look at your hormones, how to work with some of the root causes of low libido. So I can definitely help you there. You can find all of my stuff at mylibidodoc.com. I have a ton of free giveaways as well. So if you're interested in me, there, definitely go check that out. You can always find me if you want help for your chronic pain at mylimedoc.com. Happy to help you there too. And beyond that, I think the biggest thing to end with is really just circle back to what we said, which is that I just always believe that the body does not create symptoms for no reason.
Right.
Right. So it's like if you're stuck and the best your doctor is doing is giving you some pharmaceuticals to manage pain,
Hmm.
I, whether it's help from me, whether it's help from somebody else, I would just keep looking for the practitioner that can offer something that nobody else has, right? Because
Hmm.
the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Right.
But I really encourage you to keep searching, because I like the body just doesn't do this for no reason. And a lot of times doctors will put a diagnosis around something like, oh, this is chronic regional pain syndrome, for
Hmm.
example. And then people will say, well, I have a diagnosis, so I know what it is. But like, that's not actually the reason. Like, that's like the
Right.
conglomeration of symptoms. But
Right.
like, well, why do you have a chronic regional pain syndrome to
Yep.
begin with?
Yep.
So, like, having that diagnosis isn't like the answer. It's like really being an advocate to say, oh, I'm going to actually, if I have a diagnosis, I'm going to keep looking for somebody who actually understands why my body would have gotten that imbalance to begin
Right.
with,
Yes.
because there really is hope. And as somebody who went through more than a decade of chronic pain and finally got out of it and realized how all consuming chronic pain is, like
Hmm.
every moment of every day is a sort of,
Yeah.
you're just trying to survive, and to like actually get my life back after that, I know it's really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
when you feel awful and you're just trying to
Yeah.
survive every day. But it really is worth it trying to find that person that can get you out of it, because it's one of the most life-changing things to have your life back.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Dr. Diane, thank you so, so much for being here. I really appreciate your time, your expertise, and your professionalism. This could be one of those topics that people are a little leery to hear, but you made it sound easy.
Great. That's always my goal.
Yep.
Professional, classy.
Yeah. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, everybody.
So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Chronic Pain Experience podcast. If this episode sparked any aha moment for you, or if you're looking to connect with me directly, I encourage you to book a free 30-minute strategy session. No sales, no strings attached, just an opportunity to assess where you are and what next steps might be. You will find a booking link in the show notes, and if you found this episode helpful, please be sure to share, to subscribe so that you won't miss any of the future episodes. And as always, thank you so much for remaining curious.